So I'm renovating the first floor, and the first thing I need to do is put some leveling compound down to level out this floor, as there's a gradual slope. First from this area of the house, the living room where I'm standing in now, all the way over to the back door. By the back door, it drops close to 2 inches, maybe 1.75 inches. And it's also a slope from the other side of the house down to that door as well. Because I'm going to be putting leveling compound down, I did have to raise that door about 2 inches. So it's a lot of work for a little return, but it was necessary so I can level the floors. So most of my first floor is covered with tile, except for the living room that had carpet, and that's already been torn out. But behind me is the dining room, and you can see on top of the tile, I already put some 1/2 inch OSB board. So this 1/2 inch 4x12 sheet was going for about $11–12. And I did that to avoid using as much leveling compound, since a bag of compound goes for about $35. And to cover a 4x8 area at 1/2 inches, it would have taken more than a bag and a half, maybe a bag and 3/4 to cover the same area. So at $35 a bag, you can see economically trying to raise the floor with this OSB was a less expensive path, but it would still get covered with with leveling compound to get the final level. And you can see there's some areas where by that back door where I actually put multiple sheets on top to try to level it as high as I can with the OSB board before I'm going to be putting leveling compound down. For the OSB board, I did two things. I put adhesive on the bottom before putting it down, and you can see I screwed it in about every 12 inches along the grout line. You'll see screws. And then you can see these small little screws protruding up. So I put those in so I can get a consistent level when I go to put the leveling compound. So I'll use these as my gauge on how much leveling compound is needed in each area. And you can see there with that, see the green line there. So that would give me a nice consistent height. And I actually use multiple lasers, so as I move along, I can always make sure that I'm keeping the same height. So if you're gonna do something similar by putting OSB or plywood down first on top of tile to limit the amount of leveling compound, just remember to take into account the thickness of that plywood OSB. So in my case, 1/2 inch, thickness of the tile, 3/8 to 1/2 inch, and then the mortar, same thing, maybe 3/8 to 1/2 inch. And that will help determine the size of your screws, because you want to get a nice tight fastening between this top piece of OSB and the wood sub base underneath. So I use 2-inch screws. So again, if you're going to use something a little thicker, you may want to go with a longer screw in your case, but just something to keep in mind. Here you can see the lasers a little easier, the red and the green one, showing the two having the same height, so I can use as my guide. And over here on the kitchen cabinets, these will be replaced in the near future, but I am going to have to raise these since I'm raising the floor. So that means I'm going to have to raise the granite and also remove this backsplash, since I'm not going to be able to raise the granite unless this comes out. So here's one of the floor vents, and as you can see, I put this dam around it to prevent the leveling compound from going in, obviously. And it is slightly higher than those screw heads. So the screw heads are at the 5-inch mark, and you can see here, this is a little higher, about 4 3/4 or so. So if I go down to the 5-inch mark, that's where those screw heads would be. So this is slightly higher, and I put these around all the vents. So a few things I've added. First is the dam around the vent by the door. Second, you can see the blue tint on the OSB. This is the acrylic primer you need to put down first. Also important is to caulk any of the corners so none of the leveling compound can seep through. And for this back door, I put this little 1/4-inch strip of wood just to prevent the leveling compound butting up against the threshold. Just wanted to keep a little distance off that. Also here on the cabinets, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be raising these cabinets. So I put this 3/4-inch styrofoam to give a little space in between the leveling compound and the cabinet. So when I do go ahead and do that, I have some room to play with. Now, ideally, I would have raised the cabinets first, but the new cabinets aren't here, and I really want to get this leveling compound done. So I'll work with this after with leveling this. As for the island cabinets, these are a little higher. You can see originally we raised them up so we can use some bar stools. So this, I'm just going to let the leveling compound flow underneath to provide a surface there. So I'm not going to use that styrofoam around here. I'll just let the leveling compound fill underneath. And because this isn't going to be finished, I wasn't too concerned with the outcome of the caulking. So you can see it's a little messy and a lot of overflow in between the gap, but it's all going to get covered at the end, so I wasn't worried about giving a nice finished look on the caulking. The leveling compound has been placed, and it took about 50 of those 50-pound bags to cover my first floor, which is about 700 square feet. And a few things I'm just going to point out. Here's the dining room and the dining room table, and as I mentioned, I was not going to move it when I put down the leveling compound, but instead I was going to raise it up on those pieces of 2x4. So now I'm going to move the table out of the way and pull up those 2x4s. With the 2x4s removed, I can come back now with some leveling compound and fill this in, smooth it out to get a nice finish here so I can put down the finished flooring. Here's the styrofoam I pointed out earlier. So I'm going to cut this out so you can see, get a better idea of what the plan is. So with the styrofoam removed, you can see I have a nice gap here, about 3/4 inch. But now that I did give some space here, when I raise the granite countertops and take off the backsplash, I'll be able to lift this up, raise these cabinets, and eventually when the new cabinets come in, I'll be able to easily pull these out and install the new ones. So that was the purpose of the styrofoam. I didn't make any videos of the mixing or placing the leveling compound. However, I did want to point out this one tool. This is, I believe, called a whale tail, and I'll insert a video of how it actually gets used. But it definitely comes in handy when you're mixing concrete, floor leveling, material like that. You basically attach it to the side of your bucket, as so, and then you'll attach your dust collector to this side, or your dry vac, and it pulls in all that dust material as you pour in a bag into a bucket. And you should be seeing it in the video somewhere. Definitely worth it if you're gonna be mixing material like this inside the house. Outside, maybe you don't need it as much, but if you're doing something similar in the house, definitely something to purchase. It's a great investment. Now that the floor leveling is completed, I'm going to get started on this white oak engineered wood flooring installation. I'm going to go as far until I hit the kitchen cabinets. At that point, I'm going to have to wait until I receive the new cabinets, change them out, and then finish installing the engineered flooring around it. That wraps up this video on leveling the flooring first. Next time you'll see the wood flooring in and maybe the cabinets as well.